It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
So welcome everybody, welcome to Bench Talk 101. As you might have realised, this has been rather a chaotic start. We had an internet crash just now where we had no pictures, no nothing. We're just about to start. We're trying to get Nancy's slides up and oh my God, we're ripping our hair out. It's not good. As you can see, I've ventured to the barbers and managed to get a bit of a haircut there, rather different. So happy days. I feel like a stone lighter, but probably not. But there we go. So I suppose what I should say is, good evening to everybody. When I'm referring now, I'm referring to everybody in the UK and Scandinavia and Europe. And then I have to say good afternoon to everybody that are in the Americas and Canada. And then I also have to say good morning to those people that are in Australia. So tonight today, all of those time zones. We've got people represented from all over the world, so it's really quite a unique thing that's been created here, and it's been created because of COVID. The idea was that lockdown was hindering our chance to talk good quality talk about tools and our experiences in the workshop, and therefore this was a platform that allowed a few of us to get together. And then it got a bit bigger, and we had different speakers, and it's been, sort of crazy stuff. So it's kind of developing into a family. Like I said last week, we're all here to help each other. The idea is that it's supportive, and that it's there for our use. And don't shoot us when it all goes wrong. We're all amateurs, and we will have a go at trying to get it right. So tonight we've got a great guest speaker, but rather than myself that's going to introduce it, Derek is going to introduce Nancy for us.
Along with most of us here tonight, I guess, I was introduced to Nancy through her book, Making Things Work, which was published in 2017. The subtitle for that book, Tales from a Cabinet Maker's Life, connected with me immediately when I saw it. And I think I read it cover to cover in a couple of sittings when I probably should have been doing something else instead. But around about that time, 2017, there was a glut of titles in circulation, some going back decades almost, suggesting that the path to a spiritual enlightenment was through carving spoons and listening to the trees or some other kind of weird stuff. But there were certainly interesting books and well written, but nothing like the experience I had building furniture for a living. Nancy's no-nonsense account of a life on the tools is just about the most honest and accurate one there is on the subject since Alan Peters wrote Cabinet Making, The Professional Approach back in 1984. Her latest book, Kitchen Think, which is published by Lost Art Press, is every bit as revealing, and I just know you're going to enjoy listening to her tonight. So if you want to strap yourselves in, while the Bench Talk production team get ready with their slideshow, that's me tonight by the looks of it, and I'll hand you over to Nancy, who just so happens to be in her kitchen, I think. So Nancy, over to you.
Well, there's a picture that is not actually the real cover of the new book, which is called Kitchen Think, the title of which is the brainchild of Christopher Schwartz, one of the partners and editor at Lost Art Press. And in the end, we couldn't come up with anything that I think any of us liked better. So we stuck with Kitchen Think, which is literally meaningful and also a little goofy, calling to mind kitchen sink, as in everything but the kitchen sink. And I appreciated that little bit of humor. So that's not the real cover. I mean, that's not the actual book. Derek or Geoffrey just superimposed the design of the new cover onto the smaller things work that I was holding in that picture from a few years ago. So what I plan to do is talk for a few minutes, and then I hope people will have questions and we can open it up to a larger discussion, because I think that's more fun than if I just talk the whole time. So I wanted to start by how I got into building kitchens. It was never my plan to become a cabinet maker as such. After I had dropped out of university the first time, because I just didn't really see why I was there, I took a series of basic jobs just to get some income, and after mercilessly being criticized by my stepfather on the grounds that I was completely inept at doing anything involving tools, I decided that I would sign up for a woodworking class. Basically, he dared me to do it. It was more of an insult than a dare, I think, but I had to take him up on it because I was so, am I allowed to say, pissed off in this venue at him. So I went down to the local vocational college. I was living in England at the time, and that was the Isle of Ely College in Wisbech, which taught the usual array of city and guilds training courses, and spoke to the head of the woodworking department and said I wanted to take a carpentry course. And he said, I don't think you mean carpentry, do you? I think you probably mean furniture making. And and he was right. I didn't know what I was talking about. So I ended up in the furniture making training course and did 1 year of that. That was the basic certificate. I didn't want to go on any longer because I needed to make more money and support myself. By the end of it, I graduated from that year when I was 21, and I had been living away from home for a few years by then, and I had to support myself. So I also was living with my boyfriend at the time, but I decided that it was time for me to make a break. And so I put an ad in the local newspaper, which is amazing to me now that we had a local newspaper in as small a town as Wisbech at the time. And of course, back in those days, there were no kinds of social media. So if you wanted to advertise to find a place to live or a workshop, you put an ad in the local paper. And my ad for seeking a place to live and some kind of workshop space was answered by this man, Roy Griffiths, who said he had a place and could he come out and see my portfolio. And so I showed him the photos I had of the pieces I had made in the City and Guilds training. And he said he had a piece that he needed someone to build, and would I like to build it? You know, sort of, I could rent a room in his house and build this kitchen dresser for a client of his in London. And he showed me the drawing, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was not, strictly speaking, an Edwardian reproduction of anything that would have been in a kitchen, but it was a beautiful drawing of an Edwardian style kitchen dresser with cabinets beneath it. And that, I should just say that Roy was trained as a fine arts painter. He wasn't trained as a furniture maker, as far as I know. And so he had a wonderful design sense and had also spent years working in antique restoration, I believe. And so he had a great eye for period design, and his eye for period design has stuck with me throughout my career. But so it turned out that I went to build this thing in his workshop and rent a room in his house, and all of this is told in excruciating detail in the book Derek mentioned, Making Things Work. It turned out that what he really was looking for was an employee. And after I built this dresser, and here, Derek, if you can get the next slide from the magazine, now would be a good time if we can make it work. So anyway, it's working, I think. Okay, so this is a tiny view of a little, it was kind of probably advertorial, but I didn't know that at the time. Roy just ended up having this kitchen that I had helped with, photographed for publication in House and Gardens magazine. And I have no actual pictures of it that I took because I didn't have a camera at the time. So you can go to the next image, Derek, if you would. But that's the cover, is it? I can, okay, so go to the next one if you would, because I think it's a slightly larger. Okay, that's the cover. So sorry, I don't have any great pictures of this piece. But it was my first piece that I made as an employee. I built the dresser, and it, even though it was for a kitchen, it involved all kinds of traditional furniture techniques that I had learned in the City and Guilds training. So the doors were frame and paneled, they were made of solid wood, and they were hung on traditional brass butt hinges. The drawers were dovetailed, though not by hand, because Roy wanted to run a business and make money. And there were all kinds of special details on it, like period details, little arches with split turnings and cornice and moldings that he had me make in his shop. So it was a wonderful introduction to working in his shop, and he ended up hiring me as an employee. And so then he grew the business. That was part of his plan, and I left after I think a couple of years and decided I wanted to get out of woodworking, but I went back into woodworking and worked for a couple of other shops in England, and then have worked for a few places in the States before opening up my business in 1995. So kitchens have been on and off always since I worked for Roy. They've always been part of my work, and being someone who has always loved home, my own home, and wanted to shape the space in which I live, I've worked on kitchens in each house where I've lived, to the extent that I had the time or the financial means to alter them or build them. And people started hiring me to build kitchens when I opened my business. So my business today is all custom work, and it is a blend of kitchen design and cabinet making and furniture design and furniture making. Really, what determines what I'm working on as much as anything else is simply my need to make a living. So I do what I can to influence the nature of the kinds of jobs I get, and I've really worked hard over the years to cultivate a niche as someone who specializes in period styles. But I do what I need to make a living. So today, for example, I'm working on a set of 3 cabinets that will work as a pantry insert for the redo of a pantry in a kitchen locally. That will be cooler than it sounds, but I'm covered in poplar dust now. So a few years ago, Chris Schwartz asked if I would be interested in writing a book for Lost Art Press, and I was blown away because I had known of Lost Art Press for a little while before that and really admired the operation. And in the end, and I explained the story of this in the acknowledgments to the new book. Can we go to the cover of Kitchen Think now, please, Derek? Thanks. So in the end, we decided that I would write a book about kitchens. And as you can imagine, if you're familiar with the products of Lost Art Press, it is a practical book that also includes a lot of ideas and a certain amount of debunking of marketing nonsense that is so abundant in our culture. So for example, the three that come to mind immediately are, there's a little thing about farmhouse style kitchens and shaker kitchens, and also a takedown of the whole concept of custom kitchens, the way that that term is used, or that expression is used in marketing. So the book is as much about woodworking and ideas, both. It's not a book about dream kitchens as such. It's not like kitchens of the rich and famous. I have no interest in writing or reading about that. It's very much about kitchens for real people, but some of the real people in it happen to be really interesting. And I will just mention that one of the exciting things for me in putting the book together was that Johnny Gray, who is an internationally renowned kitchen designer based in England, agreed to allow us to use his kitchen, and his son Benedict, who's a photographer, photographed it, and that is just one of the most eye-popping kitchens. The other one, or one of the other ones that I was totally blown away excited that we were allowed to include is Warden Esherick's kitchen that he created for his house. So Derek, can we go to the Esherick slide, which should be next? This kitchen and Johnny Gray's kitchen, which he shares with his family, including his wife, Becca. These are just totally unlike anything that most people think of when they think of a kitchen, I think. So we can go on to Johnny's now, Johnny and Becca's. Yeah, so, and it was really cool because Johnny and Becca were extremely kind. They invited us to visit when my husband and I were in England, March a year ago. And at that time, their kitchen was totally different colors. The same cabinets were there, but the color scheme was quite different. And when he agreed to put the kitchen in Kitchen Think, he said, oh, well, we want to do a little bit of remodeling. And this entailed totally changing the colors of the room. And I just love this luscious kind of fruity palette that they chose this time. As far as I can tell, it's the third changing colors they've done over maybe about 30 years. I don't remember for sure. But the same basic cabinets, I mean, they've added and subtracted, but most of them, I believe, are the same. And that's another great example of adapting the kitchen to changing tastes and needs in terms of their family. So can we move on to the next one, Derek, please? This is a kitchen that I was hired to do in Bloomington, Indiana, which is basically where my husband and I live. We live just outside. And the idea for this kitchen was that the clients had access to a ton of salvaged hardware and other materials from a grandparent's house. And they wanted to incorporate as many of these materials as they could into the new kitchen. And I love working with salvaged materials and find them really inspiring. And that is why, if you can see the little inset of the hardware detail, the knobs on the doors and drawer pulls, those are full-size architectural knobs. They're not cabinet size, because that's what they had. And so using the oversized knobs, which are beautiful old brass hardware, required some adaptation of the hardware to attach it. But we got that lovely patina, and it also gives the kitchen kind of, I think, an Alice in Wonderland feel. So can we go to the next slide, please, Derek? The specific thing that these clients had contacted me about was they wanted to use the leaded glass panels from windows in the house. And so you can see here at the back of the image on the wall, there's a kind of a drinks cabinet over a little bar area. And that is one of the leaded glass panels that I built into a newly made quarter-sawn oak frame in a door hung on full-size architectural brass butt hinges from the grandparents' house. So Derek, let's move on to the next slide, please. This is part of the kitchen that's on the cover of the book, and I don't know how clear these images are for you all, but this kitchen is also made in quarter-sawn white oak, and this client asked to have the wood, I won't say it because it involves a swear word, but she wanted it to look like it wasn't brand new. So Daniel O'Grady, my former employee, was the main cabinet maker on this one, and so she asked him to, after everything was nice and smooth, could he create some torn grain in a few strategic places, and he did. And he also figured out how to make the best use of the hand wrought. These are genuinely hand wrought strap hinges, and they were more expensive than any hardware I've ever used on any job. And he did a wonderful job of incorporating that into this Voisey-inspired design based on the style of the utility room cabinetry in bathrooms and a kitchen at the house he designed called the Homestead. And then the little inset here is a corner cabinet, which has a Lazy Susan, and also on the right side, a secondary door into a tray and cookie sheet storage area. So Derek, I'm ready for the next slide. This is a totally different kitchen in a 1950s mid-century modern ranch house here in Bloomington with, as you can see, the converging kind of checkerboard ceiling and floor tile. Both the ceiling and the floor are original to the house. The previous owner really took care of the house, which had belonged to his uncle, and kept most of the fabric, the architectural fabric, original. So the floor is the original Ken tile floor, which is, I think, 8 by 8 or 9 by 9 inches. Not the 12-inch square vinyl composition tile that is very common today. And the ceiling is an Armstrong product made, it's like ribbon cedar with a texture, and to create the checkerboard design, it was installed at 90-degree angles. So you get the dark and the light pattern. Next slide, please, Derek. And this is another view of that kitchen. I'm gonna have to come up closer to see Okay, so another inside corner there with lighting below, and then the little inset here shows the back of the kitchen islands that we built, Daniel and I, which has a footrest that I made out of some brass plumbing rod with a piece of pine closet rod inside so that the screws would have something to bite into, and cap the ends with brass caps from the plumbing supply store. All of these kitchens that I'm showing you have lots of different views in the book, which includes views. It includes a profile of each case study kitchen that tells the story of the design and the building of it, but then the book also includes other photos from each of these kitchens and many others throughout the book in different chapters that I'll mention in just a minute. So one more kitchen I wanted to show, Derek, if you could go to the next slide. Again, totally different from the others. This is a painted set of cabinets in a 1915 flat in Chicago, which I designed and built based on an original cabinet. There were 2 original cabinets left in the kitchen, and so the new ones are based on those, but they are not fully reproductions because the clients decided they wanted recessed kicks for the kitchen, and one of them wanted modern bloom tandem drawer slides, while the other one would have preferred wooden drawer slides. And so, like all of the kitchens I work on, especially those involving couples, there were compromises to be made, and I believe we are all thrilled with the results. And that table you see in the front of that image is an old scroll saw table. The clients are students of material culture, ancient material culture, and they have furnished their whole house with really cool stuff, much of it salvaged. So another thing that this book offers is there's a chapter that talks about, it goes through the basics of how I build cabinets. I know that every professional cabinet maker I'm acquainted with builds cabinets differently. We all do it differently in terms of materials, joinery, etc. So I'm not saying this is the best or the only way to build cabinets. I am saying this is how I build cabinets, and part of the reason I build them this way is because it's a very strong and efficient way to build them that is sufficiently cost effective that I can put the really labor intensive work that I learned in my city and guilds training into the faces and specific, like special anomalous pieces of furniture that go into many of the kitchens. So that enables me, for example, to use salvaged hardware or, do inset doors and drawer faces, etc. Okay, one more slide, please. It's the last slide, and it's just the beginning layout, the 2-page spread, I think, of the chapter about my technique for building and installing cabinets. So 2 of the other sections that I think are really valuable and not so common to general kitchen design books are, there's a chapter that I call Elements of Design, which talks about considerations such as, do you want your cabinets to be freestanding or built-in, fitted for people in Britain? Do you want some of them fitted and some of them freestanding? What are some pluses and minuses? And I offer a range of examples: countertops, appliances, how to store appliances that you don't necessarily want to look at, such as a microwave, flooring, ceilings, lighting, etc. So there's all that stuff with tons of illustrations. I think that's the longest chapter, and the illustrations run the gamut from old kitchens, such as David Berman's amazing, I think, 1917 kitchen, which has its original cabinets, to contemporary stuff using architectural veneers. And then my other favorite chapter is a chapter filled with warnings and advice about how to avoid the kinds of mistakes that can cost a lot of time and money, and definitely do not elevate the cabinet maker or kitchen designer in the client's eyes. It is amazing to me how every so often I still make one of these mistakes, even though I've now written a book with a whole chapter of how to avoid them. So the point of including that chapter is to alert readers to these danger zones in kitchen design and cabinet making in general, so that you hopefully can avoid them. So that's what I had prepared in terms of notes, and I think it would be fun to spend the rest of the time on questions.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Nancy. We were trying to work as quickly as we could with the slideshow, but I think it maybe could have been a bit more polished, but thank you for that. So what happens here, everybody, with the questions is that if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see a button that says chat. And if you click on the chat, you can then just write your name in the chat, and then that then means that I'll then ask you to talk and unmute yourself. So just bear with me, because what I need to do is allow everybody to unmute themselves. Keep yourselves muted though, please. Chester's done it again. So Chester, if you'd like to ask the first question.
Hello, Nancy. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, and you?
Very good. That was my first question. The rest of them are things that I saw in the different photographs that I wondered. I collect a lot of the old House and Garden magazines because I use them in set design and art direction for period films and television. So what I was wondering is, do you know the year or the month of that magazine or the issue number, or can I get that from you sometime to see if I can get that?
Yeah, you can. I think from memory, it's the British House and Garden, and I think it was October 1981, but I may be wrong. It's probably also visible on the cover if you were able to like blow it up, but I can get it for you if you email me.
Great,
just
great.
Because I need the reminder.
I started in Manhattan trying to eke out a living making cabinets for people in apartments that they couldn't get the cabinets up into the apartments, so I would actually build them in the little apartments. And so I kind of understand a lot of your sensibilities on these things. But there were a couple of kitchens that I had some questions about. I love the Gray's kitchen with color variations. I think that's a brilliant idea of having specified cabinets that could be changed out over the years and maintaining still the wood background. I thought that was just brilliant. And the Wharton Esherick, just so nice and flowing. It was intriguing. I'd like to spend a few hours just walking around that kitchen.
And you can.
Oh, is it
You
open?
know that it's a museum.
Oh, I did not know that. Oh.
No, it's just west of Philadelphia, and it's unbelievable.
Well, there's
the whole place.
Now, on the kitchen that your compatriot did with the corner doors, and they opened side to side, how was that dealt with as far as, do you have to open one and then open the second one? Or if you reach, are they mitered, or are they alternatively?
No, the idea of those, and that's just one of many ways in which I deal with corners. And given my druthers, I avoid having cabinets in an inside corner. But that one is, the idea is that there's a primary and a secondary door. And so by opening the primary door, and the two inside corner cabinets that were shown in those slides are they're done differently, because, you know, why not customize? Most of my clients have small kitchens, and so I'm really trying to make most of the space to suit how they want to use it. So the idea is that whichever one is handier, and usually it's bigger if there's a bigger part of the L, that becomes the primary door, and you can reach the stuff you use more often via that door. And then if you need to access the entire thing, you open that one, and then the secondary door.
And then in the Vorderstrasse house, you had some crown moldings on some of the cabinets, and the cabinet on the left did not have crown molding. And so that whole kitchen sort of seemed like a collection of different pieces, sort of a collage.
And that was their idea. They wanted it, they didn't want it. I mean, when I first went, I said, okay, so I'm just gonna get up on your counter and take off a piece of crown molding so I can replicate it. And one of them, who is an archaeologist who works on medieval Celadon pottery, said, no, please don't. And and I thought, okay, these are my people. These people really are hardcore. She was like, no, we don't want to disturb the original fabric. And so I said, but don't you want the cabinet that comes up to it to butt up to this one, and I'll make the crown molding, you know, just flow along so that you don't have a gap? And she said, no, we want a gap. And I said, but you know, some poor painter down the line is going to have to paint the side of the cabinet and the wall. And she said, not our problem, basically. We want it to be separate. So, you know, it's violating, that is another characteristic of books by Lost Art Press. You know, Chris Schwartz and company are not afraid to break rules in the interest of doing something that's better than the rules typically allow. And in this case, what makes it better is it's what the client wanted. Oh. And these are not, you know, these are clients who are very particular. And so to the extent that I can give them what they want, we're happy.
It could be that they're anthropologists and they want to see those changes in the time period. So.
They totally wanted to see those changes, and part of the rationale for having, the other one has a crown molding, it's just different and it doesn't go up to the ceiling. And the idea for that was the small one that's like the little part of the L, is totally different. That was to get away from having to have a big miter in the mahogany countertop. And so to avoid that, I made that other little cabinet slightly lower so that the cabinet counters are at slightly different heights. And that whole cabinet then ended up, I said, well, let's make it look like something else that you added, you know.
Did you write the article about Yoav Lieberman? Or is that another Nancy Hiller? Do you write?
Yeah, I wrote that, yeah.
You wrote that? Well, I just wanted to say that I read it the other day, and it was, I think the writing was brilliant. It was really, really well written and an easy read and fun. It captivated me. And so I just wanted to compliment you.
Well, thanks. That's part of this series that Chris has allowed me to write for Lost Art Press, which he has called Little Acorns.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm gonna pause Chester a minute because that was far more than one question there. Totally taking it away. Jim Hendricks is next up.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Hi.
I've lost you. Let me just see if I can. Oh, there you are. Right. A lot of questions, and I have to be very careful here, you see, because my wife watches these after when they come out on YouTube, and I have to try and get the right answer here. Quite a few people ask me because I just make tools, that's it, and they say, why don't you make proper, woodworking stuff like furniture? And I just usually respond that I pop down to IKEA because they're the professionals. But the story behind it is to avoid, and I've so far done it for, let me just see, 1990, since 1993, remodeling the kitchen in our cottage. I've avoided it, right? So I have a parquet floor that is stacked in the porch that is from Savannah, made of southern yellow pine, and that's ready to go on the floor, and that's been there for a couple of decades. So it's piled up, and so I want to know, in the book, the bits that you say not to do about the kitchen and how to build it, how comprehensive is that? Because I want to accumulate all those and pretend to actually do those things so that I don't have to make this kitchen. And but seriously, I was looking at kitchens from back then and to now, and one of the things that I want to ask you is, how does our habit of what we do in a kitchen affect the way that the designs have changed? I know for a fact that when I was growing up, the center of everything was around the oven and the roast dinner, and grandma stuck her foot in the oven when it was cold, and so on and so forth. But these days, the oven hardly ever gets used, and the center of our kitchen certainly is the coffee machine and the microwave. So how does that affect how you think about what you design in terms of the utilitarian aspect of the kitchen? Storage, for instance, I like the idea of a pantry, hidden away, walk in, it's all there, rather than cupboards, and no cupboards at all in a kitchen. So how do you find that the trends within the use of a kitchen these days has affected the design of that kitchen?
Well, one difference between me and a lot of kitchen designers is a lot of people in the design world are very trend oriented, and I could not care less about what's trendy. I just want to know how my clients use their kitchen. I get to know my clients and ask, how do you use your kitchen? What would you like to change? What do you love about what's here? What do you want? Do you want more light in this room? Do you want better traffic flow? I mean, we talk about all that, and I ask about ideas about the aesthetic. I mean, a true answer to your question would take much longer than we have, but the quickest answer is to say, I'm not concerned about trends. If my clients are concerned about trends, then that becomes my concern. But generally, they're not. And so I ask my clients, and it's a back and forth, and I give them pros and cons of different. I want them to understand the implications, the practical implications and the cost implications of any choice they make, to the extent that I can give them that information. And then I let them make the decisions. And it's very much a back and forth.
Gotcha. Okay.
Did that answer? I mean,
yeah.
The question of how technology and cooking and expectations and, the whole socioeconomic climate in which we live, where, I mean, people a few generations back, you didn't remodel the kitchen. If you remodeled anything, it might be the kitchen, and it was pretty modestly done because people didn't have the disposable income, most people, that people have today. And there wasn't this industry to the extent that it exists today, driving this constant feeling of, oh my God, I've got to update, you know. So.
Right, gotcha. I mean, I find it as the kitchen is ostensibly a hub, and I kind of like the idea. I mean, we've got a cottage, so every room was separate, but knocking it down and putting it all together so the kitchen is an integral part of the actual living areas is also what's changed nowadays. It's more of a community central hub, especially if you've got young families and families generally. But
Right.
yeah, okay, that's fine. I won't take up. Let other people ask some questions. So thanks, Nancy, and thanks for the talk.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jim. Shrenik's up next.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you very much for your brilliant talk. So I'll give you a little bit of background behind my question. I work in construction, where often you find clients don't actually know what they're looking for before they come to you. And some of them will even change their designs once you start actually building and doing things. How do you deal with?
I've never had that happen.
Really?
I'm being facetious. No, it usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I hear you. Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted.
How do you deal with clients who don't know what they want, and then even once you've agreed what you're designing and they decide to change what they want afterwards? How do you deal with it? Do you often find a compromise in between, or do you tend to just go and do exactly what they want and they end up paying extra for the extra work there?
Usually the changes, I make clear from the start that changes are going
We lost Nancy?
here in the state to do a change to pay this fee in addition to whatever the new cost is. I don't do that, but because I want to work with people to the extent that I can, but I try to work out as many of the decisions, aesthetic and practical decisions, as possible from the get-go before I start cutting material. And I certainly try to make sure that people have the appliances and other things that will affect the dimensions of the cabinets on hand so that I can measure them. And there's a thing about that in the book before I start building the cabinets. But there are inevitably going to be changes, and some of them occur because I don't have X-ray vision, and nobody I know does actually. So sometimes you come across something that there was no way of knowing it was there, because you couldn't gut the room before you started the design, because the people were living there and they're still living in their house and they're cooking on a microwave on the dining table, you know. So most of my jobs are on a time and materials basis, not a fixed price. And I do that because it allows me to be as cost effective as possible. I think it's fair to everyone. I don't make as much money as I could if I gave people a fixed price and then said, oh, well, any change is going to cost you more. But again, I'm trying to work with people and treat people the way I like to be treated. So when changes come up, and I've written some things about this on the series of blog posts that I'm doing for Lost Art Press about the current kitchen I'm working on, a kitchen remodel in real time. Because I'm working on a time and materials basis, if they change the design of their sink after I've built the cabinet, you know, it will cost money to modify or rebuild the cabinet. In this case, I hadn't started building that cabinet yet when they changed the sink decision. So again, the answer to your question is I do my best to get the decisions nailed down before I start to do the building and roll with the punches to the extent that doing so becomes necessary.
Thank you. And one other question is, what portion of time do you normally spend in a project when in designing compared to when you're actually building it?
Would you say maybe is much faster. I mean, the design is much faster because I'm usually then building, delivering, and helping with the installation. And so the design will often be under 20 hours. I mean, often it's much less than 20 hours, but I guess that's all you need to know, right? I mean, of course, you can go to a kitchen designer, like a seller of cabinets that are manufactured by a commercial outfit, and you can get a kitchen design, done on a computer program in an hour or something. But it's really just a cabinet layout with some generic ideas about locations of things and what you might want there. And what I do is so much more customized. I mean, because I'm trying very hard to use every inch that's available, because most of my clients are in smaller houses with smaller kitchens, and I thrive on challenges, and so figuring out how to make the most of the available space becomes like working on a puzzle, which keeps me from dying of boredom, which is always good.
I think I think Shrenix learned a lot from the COVID briefings every day, sneaking in extra questions like that. Sneaky man. I think your first question was really good, and we've just gone through a remodeling, and the whole thing is exactly like Nancy says. You have to just go along with what's happening, and changes will happen, and it's go along with the flow. So great answer there, Nancy. So we've got, next one up is Martin. Martin, if you'd like to unmute and then ask the question.
Hi, Geoffrey. Thank you. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Yeah, that was great. I'm going to go and get the book and have a good read. It's not more of a question, but an observation. I live in Newmarket, which is not very far from Ely and Wisbech at all. So you'll know which I was quite amazed at when you mentioned it. Yes, yeah. One other thing about kitchen remodeling. This is just interesting for everybody listening, I guess. But our kitchen is now 25 years old, and we've kicked out the oven. Bought a new one, which has got a digital readout, which is quite handy for tempering plain irons, which is something I've got to have a chat with my good lady about.
I knew someone would bring it round to hand tools. Come on, Nancy's about kitchens, right? Let's mute Martin before he goes on anymore, right? There you go. Right, Josh, asking the next question.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
So, I'm first of all, I'm enjoying the book quite a lot. I like the approach you take. I'm also live in an old house. Our kitchen is not as old as our house. We have a Victorian house and not a Victorian kitchen. But which is a good thing. And I think we like that. But we are thinking about remodeling it. And one of the questions I would have is, are there any kind of red flags that you would look for when you're looking at existing painted cabinets and trying to decide, is there anything here worth salvaging and reusing, or do we just throw it all away and start over? Because I'd prefer not to throw everything away and start completely over.
So you mean, the painted cabinets that you have, what era are they from?
I'm not sure. The face frames are solid. I don't know really about the rest. It's not more recent than the 80s, but it's they're not terribly old.
Well, I would say, I mean, with paint, the first concern is lead. If they were from the 80s, they probably don't have lead paint, but you know, you can buy a lead test. I think it really is a question of also how you want it to look. You know, what you want in terms of design and whether what's there now is compatible with the aesthetic you're interested in. Because if the cabinets are well made and not literally made into the fabric of the home, but are modular, then you can probably take them out and reuse them elsewhere if you decide to not reuse them, which is what the majority of my clients end up doing. A lot of cabinets go to Habitat for Humanity. And my sister is a director of a branch, and they're very happy to have cabinets. So we do our best not to waste stuff. If they are somehow compatible with an aesthetic you can imagine using, then, you know, you can refinish them, and depending on the doors and drawers and such, you can refit them or make new ones to fit, which is its own kind of puzzle. Is that helpful?
So one other quick question. How much of a radius outside of Bloomington do you work in?
I work I mean, I haven't had any clients like on the West Coast.
Sure.
I've had design clients on the West Coast, but I haven't built anything for people on the West Coast. But no, I mean, in terms of cabinet making, I work, you know, pretty much east of the Mississippi. Okay. And sometimes people just hire me to do design work, and it's more cost effective for them to have somebody local do the building. And in those cases, I'm happy to work with them on an hourly basis and talk with their cabinet maker about particularly important details that the clients may want, because it has been my experience that I can draw something that's very detailed based on what my client and I have discussed, and some cabinet makers will take it and turn it into something that, you know, the basic dimensions are right, but it looks like something that you could have bought at Lowe's. And so I understand it's partly a matter of seeing. Some people don't see what I see in terms of detail, and I don't see what a lot of people see in photography, for example, and other areas. But in those cases, there is a kitchen in the book that was made by a company in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And the client, whom I've never even met, called, and she contacted me originally by email and hired me to design the cabinets. And so I spent a lot of time on the phone with different people who were there, and what they ended up building is lovely. I mean, it's what she wanted.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So it sounds like you might have another job there coming up, maybe. Right, next one is Matthias.
Here we go. Hello, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi. First of all, many thanks for the talk today. Also, many thanks for all your fascinating writing. I've been reading a lot of the stuff you've been writing for Chris Schwartz. I've been reading a couple of your books. I'm saving Kitchen Think until the hard copy arrives, because it's
well, that's a good
I
decision.
would prefer to read in that way. Anyway, that said, I've one comment and one question. The comment is based on what you said to Chester earlier tonight about those clients of yours, one of whom worked in medieval archaeology. I did a year of medieval archaeology at uni. It was great fun. And I think the bit of it that I enjoyed the most was when we spent a couple of weeks creeping around the attics of various medieval churches in southern Sweden. Because up in the attics of an old church, you can see all the changes that have occurred over the years. You can really see what is original fabric, when did they open up the original 12th or 13th century windows to make much larger windows to let in more light, when did they build out the nave, etc., etc. I found that fascinating. So I sort of could see where that idea was coming from, that no, you want to see what's old and you want to see what's new. So that was the comment. The question, I know that in the 30s and 40s and 50s of the last century, there was a huge project, or I suppose you should call it practical social engineering, took place in Scandinavia, where they had time study people go around and look at people working in their kitchens, and most of those kitchens in those days were enormously inadequate for the work being done, to figure out what was the ideal height of a bench, depth of a bench, in which order should you place appliances and other facilities, and so on and so forth. Was the same sort of thing done in the States? So is that sort of basic groundwork underpinning the kitchens you have to remodel and the remodels you do?
Well, there was certainly, the whole efficiency movement in the late 19th and early 20th century, and the writings of Frederick Winslow Taylor on how to make work as efficient as possible, and time and motion studies, and that definitely was done in the kitchen, and certainly even before the 30s. In the 19-teens, there are advertisements for Hoosier cabinets, these freestanding cabinets that invoke the scientific management, fruits of scientific management studies, and talk about why the Hoosier cabinet reduces the amount of work you have to do in your kitchen relative to an old-fashioned kitchen that was much more large and spread out with a pantry and an outdoor summer kitchen, etc. The main kitchens that resulted, I think, from what you're talking about are those like the Stuttgart kitchen in Europe and the Pullman kitchen here in the States, which are like a galley kitchen, 2 rows of cabinets. It is this, like, what is the most efficient work laboratory, as they called it, that you can create using the minimum of space and materials. And I have not ended up working on any of those that I can think of, but there was one, and there is one in the book. It may even be the last, or one of the last ones in the book. It's the kitchen of architect Christine Matthew here in Bloomington, which the first time I saw it was an intact, pristine Pullman kitchen with the original cabinets and the original appliances, if I recall. And she had lived with it for a number of years and was ready not to live with it anymore. appreciated the historical significance and everything, and she, without increasing the footprint of the kitchen, utterly transformed the space in the most brilliant ways. So that's my only, I mean, aside from a flat that my sister and I lived in with our mother, a tiny, tiny flat in London in the early 1970s, where we had a tiny, tiny version of that kind of kitchen, and then one I lived in a few years later, also in London, which was equally tiny. Those are the only ones I've really had experience of that I can think of.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Matthias. We're going on with quite a few questions here. I hope you don't mind, Nancy. Are you okay to answer a few more?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Scott's next up.
So, poplar dust. Sorry.
Sorry. So, Scott, if you wanted to ask a question, so you need to unmute yourself.
I think I've done that. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
I'm really enjoying your book. I jumped right into the digital version. I couldn't wait. But I am looking forward to the tactile feel of the book when I get that. So I'm going to do a kitchen remodel in the spring, and the kitchen we have currently does not have a vent over the range to the outside of the house. This seems very odd to me. Do you have experience with that? We've tripped the smoke alarms more than once. So my plan is to put in external venting over a range hood when we redo the range. So I was just curious about your experience.
I don't, as a rule, I don't like kitchen vents. I don't like the look of them. So there is a section in the chapter on elements of design on this subject with a number of ingenious different ways of dealing with it. In our kitchen, I don't think you can see it. There's literally an unfinished hole in the ceiling with pipe coming down. We have I can't remember if it's called an inline fan. There's a motor in the attic. Because one of these days we'll put a decorative like retro grill over it or something to hide it. But it works okay. It works. So if you want something minimal in terms of appearance, that's a way to do it. And that goes out through the sidewall. In the past, I haven't had a vent. And I haven't really set off the smoke alarm unless I've burned stuff and created a lot of smoke. But I guess that also depends on the location of your smoke alarms and airflow and such. So It's definitely desirable. I don't eat meat, and I haven't since I was a kid. And so the smell of meat cooking is like, ugh. And so if my husband wants to cook meat, we turn this thing on and it's very noisy. We just bought like the most like industrial basics, just make the stuff go out. So it's not one of the super duper quiet, hyper efficient kind of top line things. But it gets rid of the smell of cooking meat. And that was and then when we're cooking pasta, it's really nice to get the steam out.
Right.
In Indiana in the summer, it's very humid and it's a challenge to keep the humidity at a livable level, even with air conditioning. So does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think I need it based on how we use it. We tend to be ground zero for our family. I have several cooks in the family, and we've the way we've overcome it is have an outdoor propane burner. But in the middle of a northern Utah winter, that isn't always practical. So
Well, you said you've got the digital book, right?
Correct.
Yes, so you can look up the section on venting. But yeah, I mean, ideally, I think it is desirable to have some kind of venting.
I just wondered how you
to remember living in England when, you know, venting became a thing and people would drill with a hole saw, they would drill a hole in the window glass, which of course was single pane at that time. And there were these little vent things you could put in the window just to get some kind of air exchange. It was hilarious. It was so simple and ingenious, but it didn't really do a very good job of venting.
Right. Thanks, Nancy.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So we've got Richard. Richard's up next. Richard Hughes. Well, Richard's one of our speakers on here, and his is running away with itself now. 2,500 views for Richard. So, Richard, if you can unmute yourself, and we look forward to hearing you.
Here we go. I think I've unmuted myself. Yes, just a quick question, if you can hear me. I'm just interested in what sort of method of carcass construction you use. How do you put your cabinets together?
Well, they're made out of, most of them, I mean, if you're talking about a basic one, I use, at this point in my career, I use 3/4 inch pre-finished maple veneer core plywood, which is made with a formaldehyde-free glue, and a very nice product that saves me a lot of time on finishing for the interior, unless it's going to be painted or papered. And they are put together with basically biscuit joints and screws and glue. And I apply a 1/4 inch thick pre-finished veneer core plywood, again, just basic default setting, with screws and a hanging rail. And at the feet, I also use cleats to support the floor of the cabinet, because in most cases, the cabinets I'm building are have a flush kick, not a recessed kick. So it's kind of not easy to explain without a visual aid, but but the basic material and joinery is high quality cabinet grade plywood and screws and glue.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
With a solid face frame and solid doors and etc. Sometimes they have a face frame that in effect is not a face frame. In other words, the inside edge of the face frame is flush with the inside edge of the cabinet. Sometimes, I mean, the circumstances change all of the details.
So, okay, so in general, you build your cabinets in a workshop and bring them to the customer.
Oh, yeah.
Kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. We've got somebody called Chris has put his hand up. Let me just see if I can unmute Chris. Chris, off you go.
Is this thing on?
You're on.
Yeah.
We can hear you. Sorry, Chris Swartz from Lost Art Press. The audience is yours. You're asking a question to Nancy, or a comment to Nancy.
Yeah, we have a couple corrections I want to go over with the book. But no, no, it's wonderful. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry I was a little late to the meeting, and I got a bunch of calls. So you're doing great, Nancy. That's all I'm here to say. So,
is that really all you're going to say, Chris?
Am I supposed to say? Is it? No one gave me a script, Derek.
No. What we're going to do at this point, Chris, is you know, this kind of gives it away, really. But you know, the idea is that we bully someone once a week, and we say, right, you know, this is great to listen to people. Obviously, you've missed half of it. Admittedly, it was my fault because you did try and enter earlier with a name that I kicked you out on because I thought it was
a traditional Vietnamese name, Geoffrey. Traditional Vietnamese name.
If you want to say it, Chris, please say it. And
it's Biche Ho.
Oh,
so
but it looked like it said bitch ho, and I thought this doesn't sound right, so I cut him out. And I said you can't come in. And then, of course, he then could not come back in because the device would not let him back in. So if you've been watching me giggle and go like this, oh, like this, it's because Chris was trying to get back in and he couldn't get back in. And so, Chris, apologies for that, you know, with a name like that. When you're English like us, you know, we can't have people swearing like that on this program, can we? So there we are. So this has been absolutely probably the most prone for going wrong you know, episode that we've had so far. So apologies, Nancy. But at this point, what I say to Chris is, Chris, I would like to ask you or bully you for next week to say, Chris, could you come on and talk about you know, something that you'd like to talk about next week? And maybe we will liaise beforehand so I know your name coming in, so it's not kind of a rude word that I ban you from coming in. So, Chris Watts, would you like to talk next week on Bench Talk?
Sure, yeah, and I'll just use my drag queen name next time. So just don't block me.
Chris, thank you very much. Thank you. Nancy, back over to you. We do have, I mean, we've got other people now asking questions. Apparently, Rusty's question went the wrong way. So we've got a question from Rusty, and then the last one from Derek. So just two more questions, and then we'll call the public part over. So Rusty, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Nancy, thank you so much. I have more than one question, but I will narrow down to one. And I will give you a little preface. So I'm working on a cabinet for my hand tools, and for some reason I decided to build it just using hand tools. And I've already doubted how many times whether that was a smart idea or not. But I do know that in your book you have a chapter on hinges. And I noticed that there are many similarities in the way of thinking about this, the way I'm designing this cabinet, and the way your book goes into designing a kitchen. Can you talk briefly about how you think about hinges and what hinges to use? And it's more than just hanging the doors, as you say in your book.
Yeah, it really partially depends. I mean, the first thing is it a period kitchen of some sort? Does it have to have some kind of style? So, for example, if my clients say, we have a house full of hinges that we salvaged from our grandparents' house, we want to use them for the cabinets, well, I'm going to figure out how to use them. And so there are a variety of hinge types. Sometimes there are mechanical or practical reasons why you can't use or you have to use a particular hinge. So, for example, sometimes you need a zero clearance application, and maybe this one kind of European hinge will work with the right mounting plate, but all the others won't. Or you need a hinge to open, maybe you need a hinge that will be invisible, such as a European hinge, and you need it to open 170 degrees, and so you have to choose that different one, or you need overlay or inset or half overlay. You know, there are so many different considerations. One of the interesting, since you're asking about hinges, there's a hinge I had never even heard of in the book that Lynette Breton, a furniture maker in Maine, used for her kitchen cabinets. And I recently realized the genius behind the hinge she used. It's kind of like a European hinge, but it mounts on the surface of the door on the inside instead of requiring a hole to be drilled into the door. And that is perfect in her kitchen because she made these doors. It's a mid-century modern kind of kitchen, and she made it with a big kind of, it's not exactly a radius. It's, I don't know the geometrical design term for this. It's like a longer radius. If you had used a regular European hinge that has to be drilled into the door, then when you did that curve, you would cut right into your hole. Whereas using the surface mounted hinge that Lynette used, she was able to have her cake and eat it. That is, have an invisible overlay hinge that is very strong and smooth in operation, and also create that wonderful dramatic radius. There are several different aspects of her kitchen scattered throughout the book because she came up with a lot of ingenious ideas.
Thank you.
So Hinges, the first, you know, as with any decision, it's always a balance of aesthetic and practical considerations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to Derek, Lynn had her hand up, and I didn't see that she had her hand up. Lynn, if you want to unmute yourself and talk to us, please do so.
Okay. Nancy, I'm probably about your size and height, maybe a little shorter, and I once did a project at a church where there had been a new kitchen created in a terrible footprint, but they'd spent thousands on new cabinetry. So I was tasked with fixing it. So I had to take all those cabinets off, put them somewhere else, knock down all the walls, change the layout, which we did. I had people helping me. But when it came time to put the cabinets back, putting the uppers on my own was practically impossible. Do you do that work on your own, or do you have tricks for holding them in place? And how many fastening devices do you use? For example, the cabinets behind you in your kitchen right now.
Right. Well, it varies. So these days, I try not to install by myself, although there are times when I have to, just because I've abused my body too much over the years and I'm tired of being in pain. So, so usually I try to have one helper. But at times I have had to install cabinets by myself. For the uppers, you know, one way, the standard way, is like screw a cleat on the wall and lift it up onto that, and then somehow using your third hand that you don't have, you know, start screwing it in. Another thing I've done is like lift the cabinet in stages, literally on toolboxes, you know, like, or drywall buckets. Lift it up that high and then rest for a moment, lift it up to the next, and you know, it's not ideal. It's much better to have a cleat on the wall and a helper. And then for the actual hanging hardware I use, for most things I use, it's a cabinet hanging screw. So it's a beefy screw with a good thread that has like a truss head on it.
Right.
And that goes through the hanging rail. And of course, there are different ways to do this. Some people want everything to be invisible, so they use a French cleat. Some people, I know one cabinet maker whose backs are part of the structure of the cabinet and thicker, like either 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. I haven't seen these, but my husband has installed them and says, oh, it's really ingenious because you don't have to have a hanging strip. You just screw straight through the cabinet.
Right.
Seems like it would make the cabinet pretty heavy, but so, and it just depends. The number of screws I use depends on the what's going in the cabinet, and I will certainly want to get at least one in every stud. If it's going to be a large cabinet and have a lot of weight in it, then I want to have more than one. So I might put on a wider hanging rail so that I can get at least 2 in each stud, and then maybe one through a rail at the bottom in the cavity underneath as well. And if it's a cabinet that's going against the wall or in an alcove, I will also try to screw into the sides, you know, the side walls, especially for a really big, heavy cabinet, such as the ones I sometimes make for over a fridge, which are horrible to install.
I remember that. And do you screw them together too, the cabinets?
Well, if I'm putting up more than one cabinet going together, then yeah, I will put as few screws as possible into the wall until they're all flushed up together at the face, and then treat them as a unit, shimming as necessary at the wall.
Thank you very much. And the screws are what, 2 inches long into the wall, your fancy ones?
Well, it just depends, because a lot of buildings where I'm working have like 3/4 inch thick plaster on top of lath, and or maybe on top of that was somebody applied 1/2 inch drywall. So I would like to go at least 2 inches into the stud. I'm a worrier, so I try to overbuild stuff like that, because I don't want to ever have someone tell me that a cabinet is loose.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I mean, the last question, Derek was just pointing out that I need to make sure that everybody knows where to get the book from. Alex is still here. Alex is from Classic Hand Tools. Alex, do you want to talk about how to get the book? If you unmute yourself.
Hi, Geoffrey, you got me?
Yeah, we got you, Alex.
Lovely, how are you doing? Yeah, so, well, thank you very much for this, Geoffrey, very good. Nancy, good to hear from you again. Keep up the great work. It's straightforward, straight on to classichandtools.com, and we'll supply outside of the USA. Obviously, if you're the other side of the pond, then you can get to Lost Up Press. But everywhere else, we'll supply from our website, just classichandtools.com. Just reach out onto the new products, and it'll be there ready for pre-order.
Boom. That's a hard sale, isn't it, really? Go on.
Yeah, sorry, I can't do much harder than that.
Sorry, go on, Derek.
Alex, shall I say when the book is, I think you've got stock coming in for September, is that right?
Fingers crossed September. Things are a little bit fun and games at the moment, but yeah, it will, all being well, be in September. We'd like to allow a few weeks after it's released in the States, just because logistics can be interesting.
I mean, Nancy, that was really, really amazing. You've gone through all of the technical problems that we've ever had on this program, all on your one show. You've answered everybody's questions. You've answered more than the time lot you should have done. Everybody's fascinated about how you put the design into it and you create it, and just your natural ability just to be able to talk from the heart is really, really good. So Nancy, thank you very much for doing Bench Talk. At this point, we ask everybody to raise their glasses to Nancy and to the bench. So Nancy and the bench.
My empty water glass.
We're all rather empty because it's been a rather long talk, but there we are. Nancy, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
It's a high-tech conversation
on the low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.